The moment a name like Gene Hackman begins trending across headlines, it immediately carries a sense of gravity, not just because of who he is, but because of what he represents. For decades, Hackman has stood as one of Hollywood's most respected and transformative actors, a figure whose performances helped define the tone and intensity of modern American cinema. So when conversations began circulating about Hollywood's biggest names paying respect and reflecting on his life and legacy, it wasn't driven by shock alone, it was driven by recognition. Recognition of a career that shaped generations, influenced storytelling, and quietly set a standard that many actors still chase today. Unlike viral claims built on speculation, the discussion around Gene Hackman in recent years has been grounded in reflection rather than sudden tragedy. Hackman, who stepped away from acting in the early 2000s, has remained largely out of the public eye, choosing a private life after decades in one of the most demanding industries in the world. That absence has only amplified the weight of his legacy. When someone is no longer constantly visible, their work begins to speak louder than their presence. And, in Hackman's case, that work continues to resonate deeply across both audiences and professionals within the industry. What makes the response from Hollywood figures so significant is not just the praise itself, but the consistency of it. Across interviews, retrospectives, and industry conversations, actors and directors alike have pointed to Hackman's ability to disappear into roles, to bring a level of authenticity that felt almost effortless, even though it was anything but. His performances in films like The French Connection and Unforgiven are frequently cited as benchmarks, not just for acting, but for storytelling as a whole. These are not casual compliments. They are acknowledgments from people who understand the craft at its highest level. There is also a contrast worth noting. In an era where celebrity culture often emphasizes visibility, branding, and constant engagement, Hackman's legacy was built on something far quieter. He did not rely on spectacle or controversy to remain relevant. Instead, he relied on consistency, discipline, and an ability to fully commit to the characters he portrayed. That contrast is part of what makes modern reflections on his career so compelling. It highlights a different kind of success, one that is rooted in craft rather than attention. As more industry voices continue to reflect on his impact, a pattern begins to emerge. Many describe Hackman not just as a great actor, but as a reference point, someone whose work set a standard that others measured themselves against. This kind of influence is not easily quantified, but it is widely recognized. It shows up in the way younger actors study his performances, in the way directors speak about his reliability and depth, and in the way audiences continue to respond to his films years after their release. At the same time, it is important to separate reflection from assumption. While tributes and discussions about a public figure's legacy are often associated with moments of loss, they can also occur as part of a broader cultural appreciation. In the case of Gene Hackman, much of the recent attention has been driven by that appreciation rather than any confirmed event. There has been no verified report indicating a sudden passing, and credible sources have not confirmed such claims. Instead, what is being observed is a renewed focus on his contributions, sparked by ongoing conversations about his place in cinematic history. This distinction matters because it shapes how the story is understood. Framing the discussion as a reaction to an unconfirmed event can distort the reality of what is actually happening. In truth, the attention surrounding Hackman reflects a deeper recognition of his influence, one that has been building over time rather than emerging from a single moment. It is a reminder that legacy is not only defined at the end of a career, but throughout it, in the lasting impact of the work itself. Another layer to this conversation is the way audiences engage with legacy today. With access to streaming platforms and digital archives, viewers can revisit performances at any time, creating a continuous cycle of discovery and rediscovery. For actors like Gene Hackman, this means that their work remains present, even in the absence of new projects. It allows new generations to experience performances that were once confined to a specific era. expanding the reach of that legacy far beyond its original context. As Hollywood continues to evolve, the role of figures like Hackman becomes even more significant. They serve as anchors, reminders of a style of storytelling and performance that prioritizes depth over speed, substance over spectacle. When industry professionals speak about him, they are not just honoring a career. They are reinforcing the values that career represents. In that sense, the respect being paid is not only personal, but also cultural. What ultimately defines this moment is not a single headline, but a broader recognition. Gene Hackman's life and career have left an imprint that continues to be felt, both within Hollywood and beyond it. The conversations taking place are less about a sudden event and more about an enduring legacy, one that continues to influence how stories are told and how performances are measured. As the conversation continues to build around Gene Hackman, what becomes even more noticeable is how different generations within Hollywood respond to his legacy in distinct yet overlapping ways. Veteran actors who worked during the same era often speak about him with a sense of professional respect, recalling the discipline, the focus, and the intensity he brought to every set. For them, Hackman wasn't just a co-star or a competitor, he was a standard, someone who raised the level of everyone around him without needing to announce it. That kind of presence doesn't rely on headlines. It's built quietly, through consistency and performance after performance delivered at the highest level. Younger actors, on the other hand, tend to approach Hackman from a place of study. Many of them first encountered his work long after his retirement, discovering his performances through film schools, streaming platforms, or recommendations from mentors. What they often point out is how modern his acting still feels. Despite the decades that separate his most iconic roles from today's productions, there is a timeless quality in the way he approached characters. It wasn't exaggerated or overly stylized. It was grounded, human, and deeply believable. That ability to remain relevant across time is what separates a respected actor from a legendary one. Directors have also contributed significantly to the ongoing conversation about Hackman's impact. In interviews and retrospectives, many have described working with him as both a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge came from the level of commitment he demanded, not just from himself, but from the entire production. The opportunity came from what that commitment produced on screen. Scenes felt sharper, more authentic, and more emotionally grounded when Hackman was involved. Directors often speak about how little direction he required once he fully understood a role. Instead of needing constant guidance, he would arrive prepared, having already built a complete understanding of the character's motivations and emotional landscape. This level of preparation is another key reason why his legacy continues to resonate so strongly. In an industry where time is limited and schedules are demanding, the ability to deliver consistent, high-quality performances without extensive adjustment is invaluable. Hackman developed a reputation for reliability, not in the sense of being predictable, but in the sense of always delivering something real. That reliability built trust, and that trust allowed filmmakers to take creative risks, knowing that the core of their story was in capable hands. At the same time, the renewed attention around his career has also sparked discussions about the kind of roles he chose and the way he navigated his time in Hollywood. Unlike many actors who become closely associated with a single type of character, Hackman moved fluidly between genres. He could lead a high-intensity crime drama one year and appear in a deeply emotional, character-driven story the next. That range is often cited as one of his defining qualities. It reflects not just versatility, but a willingness to challenge himself and avoid becoming confined to a single image. There is also a noticeable contrast between Hackman's approach to fame and the way modern celebrity culture operates. Today, visibility is often maintained through constant engagement, social media presence, and public appearances. Hackman, by comparison, stepped away from that model entirely. After retiring, he chose a private life, focusing on personal interests and writing rather than maintaining a public persona. That decision has become part of the narrative surrounding him, reinforcing the idea that his career was driven by the work itself, not by the need for ongoing attention. As more voices within Hollywood continue to reflect on his contributions, the tone remains consistent. There is admiration, certainly, but also a sense of gratitude. Many industry professionals acknowledge that his work influenced not just how they act or direct, but how they think about storytelling as a whole. He demonstrated that subtlety can be as powerful as intensity, that restraint can carry as much weight as expression, and that authenticity ultimately resonates more deeply than spectacle. At the same time, it's important to maintain clarity around the context of these reflections. While the phrase "stars pay respect" suggests a reaction to a specific event, the reality is that much of this recognition has been ongoing. It is part of a broader appreciation that has developed over years, not something triggered by a single confirmed moment. As of now, there has been no verified report confirming the sudden passing of Gene Hackman. The attention surrounding him is rooted in his legacy, not in a confirmed loss. This distinction reinforces the importance of separating narrative framing from factual information. It is possible, and often valuable, to reflect on a public figure's impact without attaching that reflection to unverified claims. In fact, doing so allows the focus to remain where it belongs, on the work, the influence, and the lasting contributions that define a career like Hackman's. What continues to unfold is not a moment of shock, but a moment of recognition. A recognition that spans generations, crosses professional boundaries, and highlights the enduring power of a career built on authenticity and dedication. It is a reminder that true influence does not fade with time. It evolves, finding new audiences and new meaning as the industry itself continues to change. As the reflection around Gene Hackman continues to unfold, another dimension becomes increasingly clear. The influence of his work extends far beyond individual performances and into the very structure of how films are made and perceived. When actors, directors, and critics speak about Hackman, they are not just recalling memorable scenes. They are describing a shift in expectations, a recalibration of what audiences came to accept as believable, compelling, and emotionally authentic. His presence on screen often elevated the entire narrative, not through spectacle, but through precision, control, and a deep understanding of character. One of the most frequently discussed aspects of his career is his ability to carry complex roles without simplifying them for broader appeal. In an industry that often leans toward clarity and accessibility, Hackman embraced ambiguity when it served the story. His characters were rarely defined by a single trait or motivation. Instead, they felt layered, sometimes contradictory, and always grounded in a sense of reality that audiences could recognize. This approach did more than enhance individual films. It contributed to a broader shift in storytelling, encouraging writers and directors to trust their audiences with more nuanced material. This influence becomes even more apparent when examining the work of actors who followed in his footsteps. Many have cited Hackman as a reference point, not necessarily to imitate, but to understand what is possible within a performance. His work demonstrates that intensity does not require exaggeration, and that emotional impact can be achieved through restraint as much as through expression. These lessons have quietly shaped the craft, influencing performances in ways that may not always be immediately obvious, but are deeply embedded in the evolution of acting. At the same time, industry professionals often highlight the consistency of his output. Over the course of his career, Hackman maintained a level of quality that is difficult to sustain in any field, let alone one as unpredictable as film. This consistency was not the result of playing it safe, but of approaching each project with the same level of commitment, regardless of scale or genre. Whether the film was a major production or a smaller, character-driven piece, the expectation remained the same. Deliver something real, something that holds up under scrutiny. and something that contributes meaningfully to the story. This mindset also influenced the way productions were run. Directors and crew members have spoken about the environment that developed on sets where Hackman was involved. His focus and preparation often set the tone, encouraging others to match that level of dedication. It created a dynamic where the work itself became the priority, reducing distractions and reinforcing the idea that every detail mattered. In an industry where time and resources are constantly under pressure, that kind of environment can make a significant difference in the final result. Another important aspect of the current conversation is the way it intersects with changing audience expectations. Modern viewers have access to an unprecedented range of content, from classic films to the latest releases, all available at any time. This access has led to a more informed audience, one that can compare performances across decades and recognize the qualities that make certain works stand out. In this context, Hackman's performances continue to hold their own, not as relics of a past era, but as benchmarks that remain relevant in a constantly evolving landscape. This ongoing relevance is a key reason why discussions about his legacy continue to gain momentum. It is not driven by nostalgia alone, but by a recognition that his work still meets, and often exceeds, contemporary standards. For younger audiences discovering his films for the first time, the experience is not one of looking back, but of encountering something that feels immediate and engaging. That ability to connect across time is one of the clearest indicators of lasting influence. At the same time, the framing of these discussions still requires careful attention. The phrase "Hollywood's biggest names honor Gene Hackman's life" suggests a unified, event-driven response, but the reality is more gradual and ongoing. Tributes, interviews, and reflections have been appearing over time, often tied to anniversaries, retrospectives, or broader conversations about film history. As of now, there has been no verified confirmation of a sudden event prompting these reactions. The respect being expressed is real, but it is rooted in appreciation rather than immediate loss. This distinction is essential because it preserves the integrity of both the narrative and the individual being discussed. Attaching unverified claims to genuine recognition can distort the meaning of that recognition, shifting the focus away from the work and toward speculation. By maintaining clarity, the conversation remains grounded in what can be confirmed, the impact of Hackman's career and the continued respect it commands within the industry. What ultimately emerges from this moment is a deeper understanding of how legacy functions in Hollywood. It is not a single event or a final chapter that defines it, but a continuous process of recognition, influence, and rediscovery. For Gene Hackman, that process is still very much active. His work continues to be studied, discussed, and appreciated, ensuring that his contributions remain part of the ongoing conversation about what great acting looks like. As the conversation reaches its final stage, what stands out most is how the narrative surrounding Gene Hackman ultimately shifts from momentary attention to lasting meaning. What began as a surge of headlines and widespread discussion evolves into something far more substantial, a clear acknowledgement of a career that continues to shape the industry long after its most active years. The idea of Hollywood's biggest names paying respect is not tied to a single moment or event, but to an ongoing recognition that has been building over time, reinforced by every new generation that encounters his work. Within the industry, this kind of recognition carries a different weight than public praise. When actors, directors, and producers reflect on Hackman's career, they are doing so from a place of direct understanding. They know the demands of the craft, the pressures of production, and the challenge of delivering performances that resonate beyond the immediate release of a film. Their respect is rooted in that knowledge. It is not based on image or popularity, but on the technical and emotional precision that defined his work. That distinction is what gives their reflections a deeper level of credibility. There is also a noticeable shift in how these reflections are being expressed. Instead of focusing solely on specific roles or achievements, Many industry figures are now emphasizing the broader lessons that can be drawn from Hackman's career. They talk about discipline, preparation, and the importance of authenticity. They highlight the way he approached each role with a clear understanding of its place within the story, rather than treating it as a standalone performance. These insights go beyond admiration. They function as guidance for those who continue to work in the field. At the same time, audiences play a crucial role in sustaining this legacy. The continued interest in Hackman's films ensures that his work remains visible, accessible, and relevant. Every time a viewer watches one of his performances, whether for the first time or the 10th, the impact is renewed. This cycle of viewing and reviewing keeps the conversation alive, allowing his influence to extend far beyond the period in which the films were originally released. It also creates a shared cultural reference point, something that connects different generations through a common appreciation of quality storytelling. The modern media environment adds another layer to this process. With constant access to content and information, audiences are no longer limited by time or geography when exploring film history. This accessibility has contributed to a resurgence of interest in actors like Hackman, whose work benefits from close examination. Viewers can pause, revisit, and analyze performances in ways that were not possible in earlier decades. This level of engagement deepens the appreciation of his craft and reinforces the reasons why his work continues to stand out. However, this environment also requires a more careful approach to information. As seen in earlier stages of this discussion, the speed at which narratives can form often outpaces verification. The phrase "Hollywood in shock" or similar language can create an impression of urgency that is not supported by confirmed facts. In the case of Gene Hackman, it is important to reiterate that there has been no verified report of a sudden passing. The respect and recognition being discussed are real, but they are not tied to a confirmed event of that nature. Maintaining this clarity is essential, not only for accuracy, but also for preserving the integrity of the legacy itself. When recognition is based on verified information, it carries more weight and meaning. It allows the focus to remain on the contributions that define a career, rather than on speculation that can distract from those contributions. In this context, the ongoing reflections from Hollywood figures serve as a more meaningful tribute than any unverified headline could. What ultimately defines this moment is the convergence of professional respect and public appreciation. Industry figures acknowledge the technical and artistic impact of Hackman's work, while audiences continue to engage with it on a personal level. Together, these perspectives create a comprehensive picture of a legacy that is both influential and enduring. It is not confined to a specific era or limited by changing trends. Instead, it adapts, finding relevance in new contexts and continuing to inform the way stories are told. As the discussion concludes, the central theme becomes clear. The recognition surrounding Gene Hackman is not about a single headline or a moment of shock. It is about the sustained impact of a career built on authenticity, discipline, and a deep understanding of storytelling. It is about the respect earned through decades of work that continues to resonate across the industry and among audiences worldwide. In the end, what Hollywood's biggest names are honoring is not just a life, but a standard. A reminder of what is possible when craft is prioritized over attention, when consistency outweighs spectacle, and when performance is driven by truth rather than expectation. That is the legacy that continues to be recognized, discussed, and respected long after the final scene has faded.